women's hair in the 80s. It was like just they frizzed that stuff up. So hairnet, I blame hairnet.
Well, I spray some hairspray on mine because this stuff that I use for my hair doesn't hold it right. So I spray a little bit of hairspray on it and I choke half to death on it. So I can only imagine what the earth feels when every other house is doing it.
It's dying, bro.
Interrupt your regularly scheduled program for a special news bulletin from our partners in the Twisted World.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled program for a special news bulletin from Twisted World.
All right, Twisted World fam. Hey, we are back next week's episode, and we are again without our fellow companion, our good friend Cody.
Yeah, the man went back to California for the week. Just
for
to
like
go to
2 weeks, right?
Here's how messed up it is. Not only did he fly back, but he flew back and he took my mom and his mom, both of our moms, with him and his wife to Disneyland. And I'm like, this man is taking my mom to Disneyland.
Yeah.
I'm stuck out here still having to work. And here he is off, going all over California. No, so they were going back to visit, spend some time with some friends this weekend and decided, well, while we're out here, let's have some fun. And so I think they made a quick trip down to Disneyland, took my mom and his mom, who are really good friends. And they had a good time.
What an amazing wife he has. She's such a trooper. I mean, she is a little ways along with their baby and all that. And she's like, heck yeah, let's go to Disneyland. Like,
you know what I actually thought was funny? So my mom calls me a couple days ago and she's talking to me and, I could tell they're in the car and they're on the way back. And she said, yeah, we're only an hour or two away from, getting back to the house. We've been on the road all day. Cause I was telling her I was stuck in traffic. And, she mentions that, Cody and Sarah had plans, I think with DJ and Ashlyn, and they were going to be playing some Magic. And I was like, oh yeah. I said, I'll be playing Magic tomorrow because this was Friday night. We were going to be playing it at your house on Saturday.
All right.
And she goes on to say that Cody had been trying to explain to her how the game works. And
this is your mom.
This is my mom.
Okay.
My mom is being educated by Cody on how the game works. And she said she was, kind of on board until it got to about, the 25-minute turns that Cody puts in order. And that was where she was like, I don't think I could play a game if it takes you 25 minutes to make a turn. And I'm thinking to myself, neither can I. Neither can I. And for those of you that don't understand what we're talking about Magic the Gathering. It's a card game. Most nerds in the world know what I'm talking about.
And around since like 92, 93,
represent. But anyways, it's a card game where you have a strategy and your intentional purpose is to take all the life from the person that you're playing against. We start with 40 lives. They're very long games. We've seen a game, I think, go 6+ hours.
Yeah.
They're very fun when they go that long. At the same time, they're very exhausting. But anyways, a lot of fun. Cody is the worst and takes significantly longer than everybody else to make his moves. And because of that, it's not fun to play with.
Yes, he's a well thought out, plans his stuff very intricately, which is funny because his dad's an avid chess player and takes his moves fairly quickly, but it is well thought out, right?
That's probably where he gets it from. I bet you that when Uncle Don, goes out and plays these chess games, that he takes his time. Now, I believe in chess matches, your moves are timed.
There are matches that are timed, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I think he's done it long enough that he thinks his moves out well in advance, and his counter moves if one doesn't work out the way he thought, and he does make calculated moves decently quickly. Cody's still trying to get there. Yeah. So
the difference between chess and Magic, and maybe it's not really a difference, is that when Cody's done making his move, you've now fallen asleep 3 or 4 times, and he makes you pay for it, because every time he makes moves, which is like this big puzzle piece, you really have no idea what he's doing because he spent so much time trying to explain it out. And whatever the result is usually hurts you or makes you not want to play against him.
Maybe that's a strategy. Maybe we should reanalyze this, because he's
one of the things I learned a long time about Cody is he likes to troll. And so if everything in life wraps around the idea that he's trying to troll you, maybe these 25-minute moves are on purpose, just to get under your skin, to talk about them on a podcast when he's not around and can't defend himself. Anyways, what are we talking about today?
So I wanted to touch something about Disneyland because I was it my wife or maybe yours that was talking about. I guess they were in jackets, or I don't know. There was like
Oh,
pictures of them and they were in jackets. And we're like,
yeah. So they text us a picture of Sam's Doghouse. It's a little restaurant that my parents owned in El Cerrito, California. Bought it years ago, back when I was a little kid, and it's one of the things that I've craved since coming out here. And I thought, man, I should have gone and had a chili dog before I
supposed
left
to remember?
California. We were
Because
supposed to.
I've never
and-
been and I was juiced and we totally forgot.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
got so busy. So Sarah had never been, and so since they were out there, they made the trip down there, and she's like, "I'm officially a part of the family now." And he was wearing a beanie in the photo, and that was what caught Julia's eye.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's a brisk 72, right? And the word brisk does not exist in Texas.
No,
you
no.
go from you ever pulled a drink out of the refrigerator or an ice chest, and it's so cold, right? It's just so cold that you can just see like the steam coming off of it. Really not steam, it's kind of frost coming off of it.
Yeah.
And then in Texas, like you have that outside, and then it just starts to drip. The condensation is so heavy, and you're like, okay, I'm going to wipe this off, and then it drips some more, and then you wipe it off, and you drip some more. That's what it's like to live in Texas and go inside and outside of a house.
Yeah.
Right.
It's crazy.
You walk inside, so you're outside, and you're sweating, and dripping. You're like, oh god, I need air. You get inside, the air conditioner is so cold, it's so nice. But the problem is, you were so hot outside that when you come inside, you now have this like condensation that like sticks to you, and so you really can never get rid of the clammy feeling of being outside in the heat when you come into the. So there's a lack of comfort that comes from having the air conditioner unless you run into like 50 degrees, which I'm happy to do. But anyways, I digress.
Well,
I didn't move here because of the weather, though. Just to throw that
absolutely.
out there, everybody's like, "Oh my god, it's so hot."
But I do want to put this disclaimer out because I've asked numerous people that have lived here their whole lives. And they say, yeah, August, you can expect, 100 degrees, 105 degrees, but it's been uprights in 110, 112, and it's been going on for months. And multiple people that I've talked to that have been here, again, their whole lives or a multitude of years have stated that this is not normal, right?
No.
This is a huge heat wave going on. I know other parts of the country are experiencing a lot of different weather and whatnot as well. But like I said, the natives here that have been here, their whole lives, grew up here. Even our pastor Josh, big shout out to him. He had mentioned, this is a little bit above what they are used to, right?
Right.
And so, and that kind of goes into what I want to talk about today. What something I found. Well, first it started with a video. I think I saw it on TikTok or Facebook. I'm not sure, but it's this NASA scientist who chained himself to a JP Morgan Chase bank. So this guy, it was a few months back, and he has started this chain of events where scientists around the globe are protesting against different banks and things of that nature. And specifically why he chose JP Morgan Chase is my understanding is they are the largest funder of fossil fuels out of all the financial institutions. So he goes and connects himself over to this bank. And so if maybe we can get the link to the video when we post this stuff up on social media sites. But you listen to this guy, and my first thought was this guy's possible kook. Like, is this guy really a NASA scientist? But yes, lo and behold, he is a scientist, and his name is Peter Kalmus, and he is specifically for NASA, is a climate. He works on biological systems and climate change of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory System.
To be clear, this guy isn't a former NASA employee. He is a current NASA employee.
Current.
Because I saw the video.
Well, I don't know. He may not be current.
I saw the video and I was like, first off, what is happening? What is this guy doing? Because it kind of cut off. Second, like he gets super emotional and kind of slightly crazy in the video. So I was like,
yeah. Well, and so
does he really work for NASA still? Because I'm thinking after a video like that, NASA would be like, listen, it's been great, but
we can't have this
go our separate ways. Right. We got to go our separate ways. Or how would you like to be on the first Mars trip? And you get him off the planet. Listen,
so I couldn't find if NASA let him go. I'm assuming there'd be all kinds of lawsuits.
I'm assuming he's no longer with them after something this public.
So when I searched it, though, it still states that he is a data scientist for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratories and associated with Project Sciences at UCLA's Joint Institute for Regional Earth System Science and Engineering. Current.
Right.
This is his current, right? This is not. It's not showing. Hey, did he get fired or anything like that? I'm assuming there'd probably be some deep lawsuits but I'm sure there's NDAs. He had to have signed an NDA working for NASA. So if he's out here like, hey, this is what I found in my studies, I'm sure it's probably not a good thing that he's dumping that stuff out into the world.
To kind of squash it out, so we make it easy for people.
Yeah.
What is the message that he is saying right now? The thing that he said that's on YouTube and TikTok. Like, what is it that he's saying? And that's what we'll discuss today.
So one, let's go back to when did the whole global warming and the guy that was running for president, what was his name?
Are you talking about Al Gore?
Al Gore. So Al Gore did the whole
Fahrenheit 9/11.
Yes, exactly. So that whole thing took place. He's now coming out. This guy's coming out and stating that we are 100% scientists are being hushed to not talk about this. That global warming is only really the tip of the quote unquote iceberg. That our planet, our ozone, the atmosphere that keeps us, regulated with water pressures, temperatures, and things like that, has been highly, highly, highly depleted, and we are in for some massive, weather phenomenon deeper than what we're experiencing. So, for instance, like I said, we're all this massive heat wave here. It's been over 100 degrees now. I don't think had we even fallen under 100 in the last 3 weeks.
We have not. So right now, and I pull these numbers up for future argument in this because I tend to be on the naysayer side of this. But we are currently at 23 consecutive days.
23 consecutive days of over 100
in the Dallas
degrees.
Area. Right. So that it's Texas, but right now, Fort Worth, Dallas area, 23 consecutive days of 100 plus days. So it's a lot. It's a lot. I have an argument to kind of go against all this that I'll make a point with that same number. But I say that all to digress it feels like an anomaly. And the reason it feels like an anomaly is because you're like, well, when was the last time something like this happened? Right. When was the last? I know that I saw on the news the other day, San Antonio was at 30 something days or something like that. And it was it was a lot that they had, whatever. And so what generally happens with this global warming and the push on it right now, it's so in our face because you've got Biden and you've got other sides where it seems like global warming is a big press, but I just don't, as an individual, it's never really been something that I've been hyper concerned with. If I've not dug into the science behind it. I'm no scientist. I'm just a regular dude that works in the IT information technology field. If global warming is an issue, my question then is it possible for us to stop it first?
Well,
right?
So his claim and a multitude of other scientists around the world are claiming that we have to limit global warming by 1.5 degrees Celsius for the next, one scientist said 3 to 5 years. This guy's saying we need to do it for 10 years straight by slowing down the emissions which come from fossil fuel farming.
Okay. Well,
so
it doesn't necessarily come from well, okay, I'll leave it there. Yeah. But here's my question.
I don't know. I'm not.
Where does the largest amount of fossil fuel farming come from?
Well, that's a great question.
Well, I don't know. Developing countries.
Shoot it up. Yeah.
Developing countries. The United States is already developed. The European Union, the UK, Europe in general, developed. Places like India and some of those other countries that aren't as developed as us are heavily producing. China heavily producing those commissions. So we all sign on board for this, and if every single individual in the United States stopped producing carbon, it wouldn't be enough.
No,
if every one of us plus Europe did it, it wouldn't be enough. So like I said, I come from a place where if this is really happening and we're really having this scientific report outs and the results of this is that it's happening, we're having degradation in this, and that we need to do something drastically change, I don't know that we can. So that being said, it's not going to sit on my hands. I'm going to make one of the things that it's kind of crazy when it comes to human and human nature is that we adapt really well. Right. This isn't evolution. This is just the concept that we adapt really well. We can live in the coldest of coldest environments to the hottest of hottest environments. Right. We as coming from California, 70s, 80s is a really nice day. We would get a couple of 100 days here, 90 days in Vacaville, but for the most part, 70s, 80s, we're pretty comfortable. We love that. But coming to Texas, you're like, oh god, it's really hot. It feels hot when you're in the 90s, right? Because we're not used to that all the time. So, but I promise you, 5 years here, it's not going to be that big a deal. It'll be hot, but it won't be that big a deal. It's not going to affect what we're gonna adapt. And if I chose to tomorrow to move to Oklahoma and live in the snow, I would adapt, right? And so we have an ability to adapt. My wife
would. I'm just saying.
we as the human society, I guess that's not everybody, but we have the ability. We have a strength and an ability to adapt to the situations and the current situations that we live in, right?
And let me just throw this out real quick because you're absolutely right. Because I think his name is Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General. He was quoted as saying climate activists are sometimes depicted as dangerous radicals, but the true dangerous radicals are the countries, and this is where you're 100% accurate, that are increasing the production of fossil fuels. So yeah, as America, we've dialed that way back because we are now a formed, well established. We're solid in that, but there a majority of the world that is still developing is producing these fossil fuels, right? And that's why I think when you look at it, wasn't just this guy in I think he was in New York. I'd have to go back and look at the article again, but him chaining himself to Chase Bank. But Chase, again, the reason he chose Chase Bank is because they are the top funder here in America, whether they're funding it across the world or whatever the case may be, of financial institutions that are funding fossil fuel production. But this happened, and this one's funny. I guess the scientists in Berlin because again, this was done by a ton of scientists in different countries around the world, Spain, the Spain Parliament, London, Berlin. So these guys glued their hands to the road to block a bridge. And so they're like, hey, we're effective. You can't move us. So there's pictures of these police officers scraping glue to get their hands off. This must have been some strong glue, I'm guessing. So effective. Yeah. They glued their hands. It's great.
That's commitment.
That's true commitment. Yeah. Through a chain. Let's just glue our skin to the asphalt. That's fantastic. Sounds like a great plan. I did some research, and let's talk about global warming, for instance. I think a lot of times people hear the word global warming and they go, oh, okay, well, if that's the case, then why are some areas getting all this snow and extreme cold? And what global warming means is, let's just talk about depleting the ozone, right? It doesn't necessarily just mean that it's going to be hot everywhere. It doesn't necessarily just mean like heat waves, no rain, things of that nature. What these scientists are saying is that extreme weather phenomenon are going to take place. So you're going to talk about heavy snowstorms that would have never, and in recorded history, keep that in mind, it's recorded. So 800 years ago, who knows what happened, right? 1,000 years ago, we don't know if maybe the same stuff took place. And that's the hard part, is that, again, we're just talking about recorded history. But like what happened in February of this year in Texas, northern Texas, they had this crazy snow ice storm. And they had like close to 2 feet of snow or something like that. And even the governor of Texas said one of the most significant icing events that's ever hit the state of Texas in at least recorded history. So you're talking about, we're not just talking about it being ridiculously hot everywhere. Even though some other events that took place to kind of back this up, and this is separate from this guy's article and what he's saying. I just found a complete article that talked about strange weather phenomenon that have taken place just in 2022. There was Storm Izzy, which was the southeast of America. So North Carolina, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, Kentucky areas, that brought in like mass amounts of low temperatures, high winds, snow and ice. and decimated homes and left 100,000 people without power and places to live and stay. And overnight had close to a foot of snow where they aren't prone to that.
Right.
You had there was one in Malaysia. I think Malaysia was hit by like some crazy amount of tsunami floods, and close to 250,000 people had to be evacuated. Stuff that that has never happened in multiple generations. But then you look at like Antarctica. Antarctica's having heat waves. Now, heat wave to Antarctica is 70s, right?
Right.
So they were getting into like the 60s and the 70s in Antarctica, which is, again, recorded history, never happened.
Right.
India in March had the hottest day ever it's ever had in 122 years.
Sheesh.
122 years. It hit like, I think it was like 115, 120 degrees or some crazy off the wall number. Hottest day it's ever had in 122 years. Now,
Wow.
that 122 years, by the way, is recorded history for them. So, and when we say recorded history, it's not that they don't have recorded history of events and things that have taken place, but when people started recording the weather and the temperatures, they've never seen this hot ever. Mozambique had like more than, it was like 3 or 4 cyclones that hit it. Again, killing multiple people, just stuff that they never experienced. And they stated that it's as a result of the Indian Ocean getting warmer. Right. So here's this ocean that generally sits at a cooler temperature and it's warming up. So these are just things that, is it coincidence that this guy's out here saying, hey, we're being hushed. We're not able to talk. We're tired of it because we're trying to tell you that the earth is not okay, that the weather is going to only get worse. He's not saying like, hey, it's just going to keep happening. No, he's saying it's going to get worse. You know what it reminded me of? Did you ever see that movie? I think The Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah, that's the one where the New York City freezes and
like you walk outside and you're instantly frozen.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like
the great chill.
Yes, right. So this movie's from like 2022, and it depicts kind of, extremely and Hollywood-esque way that what this guy's talking about, and that's what he's saying. This guy's basically telling us if we don't do something as a world, not as a country, as a world.
Do you believe it?
Man,
because I tend to be more factual and rely on stats and statistics, historical stuff, but just off the cuff, because I mean, if you guys haven't figured it out by now, this is episode 33, right? But by now, I am skeptical of everything.
Everything,
right? My wife's like, "Oh, hey, I'm gonna go get my nails done. It's only gonna be this," and I'm like, and then I get a text. It's like, "Oh, actually, it was this," right? So I'm skeptical at most of the time. I'm not very open to new ideas that they're going to work out exactly as we envision them. I tend to be skeptical of most things. And then I like to do my own research really before. Well, I'll lie. That's a lie. I will state my opinion on things, but most of the time I like to go have research and say, okay, well, this is what backs that. So going back to the Texas freeze, right? It was the thing we all heard in California because, the media kind of blew it up in a certain way. And, like
friends and family that were living here and experienced
friends and family, people that saw it. I had family in Oklahoma kind of experienced the top part of that. And, all you got is like, oh my God, Texas is a hot state and it froze and there was snow. Well, historically, that's not necessarily true, right? Every 5 to 8 years, they have a cold snap. It may not be 6 to 8 degrees like it was during that freeze, but they have a cold snap where it gets down below freezing. I mean, I literally can list, I was listing things up just a few minutes ago, and it was like every April, there's like 3 consecutive days below freezing, right? So freezing is 32 degrees. We're not talking about like the ice age, but 32 degrees. But historically, I pulled that information up. Like, what was the last time that you saw something like 6 to 8 degrees in Texas? Right now, it's 70 years. So it was a pretty big thing, but that's because it hit a big portion of Texas. Actually, there were cold snaps that were significantly longer because I think it was like 200 and something hours of cold weathers where power was out. And to be honest with you, if the power wasn't out, we probably wouldn't have heard much about it, because the power going out, mainly because of this new green technology, fans, hydro pumps, because all of that stuff failed and they weren't using, fossil fuels or nuclear power plants, we probably wouldn't have seen a lot of what the messaging we saw about how they were all without power. It's a misguided approach to think that something like that green energy was going to supply the need in an event like that. It didn't. And so because it didn't, there was a fallout. That's it. That's what happens. 1940, it happened again. 1983, it happened again. 1899 was the one that I saw was like the furthest back that I could see in the history of it. Speaking to the heat waves. So I just told you, what did I just tell you? We're at 23 days consecutive. Yeah. How high, as far as rank, do you think that falls in consecutive days over 100 for Texas? And also, I won't even say Texas as a whole, even though that number is a little bit more exaggerated, but just the Dallas-Fort Worth area where we live. Where do you think in the ranking from 1 to 10 that falls as far as the most consecutive days over 100?
I'm going to say that they've probably hit maybe 2 months before.
Well, I'm talking
3,
just
4, 5?
consecutive days. So
Yeah.
Out of all the dates in history, right, it falls at number 6. Number 6 overall. Yeah. When do you think? Okay,
what was the biggest consecutive that Texas?
42 days.
42 days. Okay.
42 days. So here's the point I'm trying to make. Right, we in our own normal lives, right, when we see things like dips, and I'm not talking weather, dips in the market, economy, dips in the market. We usually see a dip, I would say, every 10 to 12 years. Right. Doesn't necessarily need a recession, but we usually see a dip. The market recedes and kind of goes down and goes back. Yeah, housing markets come down, things kind of rebalance, and then we have a pop and we grow up to that next plateau, right? That usually happens every 10. Well, I would say that weather functions almost in a similar way, right? So right now it seems really hot. We're like, oh my God, this is the hottest it's been. Oh, it's disgusting. When do you think the day above that was? So I'm going to read the dates to you. So right now at 6, we're at 23 consecutive days, August 7th, 2022. 24 days. The one above it, which is at 24 days right now, was in 99. Okay. The one above that was 25 days in 1952. Then it was 98, 2011 at 40 days, and 1980 at 42 days. So what you see in that, if you break those numbers out and organize them, is about every 10 years, we have a hot year.
So you're just saying it's positioning of our planet, and that's what's causing us.
Rotation of the world. No, I'm not. This is not me disproving. Right. This is me not disproving, because they talk about polar icing and the water levels rising or shrinking. Right. We're seeing we're not getting as much rain. We're getting weird weathers in another area. So I'm not disproving that. I'm just using statistical fact to say that what is happening this year is not an outlier. Right now with heat.
Specifically heat, yes.
Specifically heat. But if we get into the winter time and we have another massive freeze like we had last year, or even next year have a massive freeze, that would be out of the norm. That would something that cause pause. And so I'm going to let you respond to that, but I have what my approach to this would be, as opposed to what it feels like the world kind of wants, or the United States wants us to go with.
Okay. So I just want to caveat real quick, because I agree that maybe the extreme heats in Texas are not the end all be all answer to explain, anything and everything. This scientist and his group of scientists around the world that are speaking out and acting out. But the one I got to look at the heaviest, because I think it was like the 1940s or somewhere right around there, with maybe the early 50s, where the U.S. started the U.S. Antarctic science missions, right? Where we have studied the Antarctic, day in, day out. We always have teams there. In fact, when my dad was flying for the military, he did these things called the ice missions, where they would fly, the U.S. military would fly in, any kind of materials, resources that the scientists needed out there. They would fly to New Zealand and then hop over to Antarctica, drop the stuff off, and dip out. So we have been studying Antarctica for a very long time, right? And it averages, since the dawn of us studying the U.S., it has averaged a minus 63 degrees temperature And for the first time in history, it was measured just this recent March, I believe, at over 0 degrees. First time. Cool. So you're talking 70-degree jump, right? 70-degree jump in the history of us studying Antarctica. So there is no trend. There is no
well, because we don't have a historical. We can't go back. So how long have we been looking at that?
I can look it up. We have.
It's probably a couple hundred years.
No, I think it was in the 50s.
Oh, okay.
1957.
Right. So we have nothing to go off of. That's kind of crazy because for Texas, they were able to track a heat wave back to 1899. So
we didn't. But we didn't have the means to be out in Antarctica and keep people alive either.
We may see true. We may see a pop or something like that historically if it had been done. So I mean, it's worth noting. The reality is,
but based on your statistics,
since the 1950s. The only way to disprove that theory would be to wait another however many years. And I use 10 years just as that was what I was experiencing with the particular heat wave, right? When I see things like heat waves, droughts in California, it always seemed to kind of go in that way, right? We would go, 10 years with little to no rain, and then we'd have El Nino. Right. And then we would have, right. And then we would have all these other little things, and then a big storm would come in. And so I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it always seemed like these things come in waves, right? We get to see meteor showers every 75 years. We get to see this certain thing and constellation in the sky every 25 years. Well, if things were so prescribed that it was a 12-month calendar, and we go from year to year, we're like, oh God, everything's so different. We don't look at things. We shouldn't look at things in that lens. We really should look at things for historical preference. Now, right now, if it hits above 0, this is the first time we've ever written it down in, as far as documented history. It should give you some pause. Okay, so I'll agree with you. Let's give it some pause because we don't have anything historically to say otherwise. And we won't for a number of years because historically, let's say we've been tracking this since the 50s. That's 70 years. Right? That means within the last 70 years, this hasn't happened. That means the next time we would ever be able to prove that this happens in a structured pattern or rotation means 70 years from now. So we won't actually be able to know that until 70 years from now. And the reality is
that would also mean that, because this was just March, that would also mean that the temperatures would rebound to normal. And we would have to, even if you watch it for the next 3 years, if temperatures don't go back to that negative 63 average over the last 70-something years, then why? What is causing?
It doesn't disprove it, though. So the problem is, and this is where I agree with the take, is when you only have one line of data with regards to the temperature changing, you have to react like this is an anomaly until otherwise said. So even if this lasted 7 years and then restored itself, you may find in 70 years that this does it again for another 7 years, right? But we won't know that because 70 years from now, we can't react as if this isn't a routine because we have no data to prove that it isn't or that it is. So that being said, I'm just saying people in Texas aren't freaking out about a heat wave. Of course they want rain. And of course they call it a drought, right? Because it hasn't happened for 10 or 12 years. But the reality is we know that historically this happens every 10 to 12 years. So once we get past this season, we expect rain, we expect things to go back to normal. And next year, probably not to be a 20 to 30 days, 100 or plus days. That's the expectation that I should have when I go back and look at the data since 1899.
Right.
But I can't say that for so going back to the polar cap, right? So we're talking about Antarctica, the degrees being above 0 degrees Celsius. Heck, we should have a lot more people down there doing research if that's the case, because we can survive a lot better down there in that degree. But my take on
most first world countries do have scientists there, so it's not like it's just U.S. It's a joint coalition, right? That they study.
My take on global warming for the longest time was it wasn't real. Right?
I agree with you. I was at one point too.
As a young man, I was like, this is stupid. Why are we focusing on this? It has very little impact to what happens. This is yada, 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 whatever. But let's just imagine that let's lean on the idea that the polar ice cap is shrinking. We've got video proof of it or photographic proof of it. We're measuring temperatures down there. It's changing, even though I can never go there and disprove it. I'm relying on someone else for their information. And as you know, in the world we live in today, everyone is trustworthy. So
I gotta know though. I gotta throw this piece out because you had 12 or 13 protests from I think Sydney, Australia, the UK, Berlin, Spain, America, of course, multiple in America. You have all these scientists, all these highly educated PhD scientists that are risking their jobs. They're risking being arrested, and they're doing all of this, and they're taking a hard stance. And all of them got arrested. All of them, again, I can't find out if this dude's been let go or not, working for NASA. So they've all risked their careers. They've all risked their reputations. They've all risked facing criminal, penalties. They've all done it, and they all did it within a very short period of each other. So you're telling me they're all just a bunch of whack jobs that decided, hey, we got nothing better to do. Let's all go chain ourselves.
No, but you can't tell me that we haven't all of a sudden had a pop in our culture and society of protests, right? You can't tell me that we haven't had this pop in things like, and it's kind of a going in a different direction, but suicides, homosexuality, transgenderism, that we haven't seen an exponential growth in those things. And I'm gonna take a little conservative or a controversial spot on this, because of society, because of where it is and popularity and those types of things. I think you'll have more proponent people to say, this is what's happening. We need to get out in front of people because of the popularity and the attention that it will draw, rather than the other way around. And I would also go to argue that not all scientists are created equal, and that they're probably not as created equal anymore. If you've been to the doctor lately, not all doctors are great. So it's one of the, I tend to lean more on, I hear what you're saying. But when I see things like the BLM riots and some of those other things that happened this last year, protests aren't evidence of an injustice or a message that needs to be heard. I think protests are a right that we have, and I believe that everybody should have the ability and the right to protest as long as no harm's being done. But at the end of the day, I don't believe that a protest is evidence of truth.
And so
I think it's an evidence of perception and maybe desired truth.
So you think we shouldn't take these guys serious? All these people, 12 to 15 protests across the U.S. of a multitude of different, PhD scientists, highly educated individuals in this particular field, all taking a stance because,
I would say that a majority of those, if we did enough research, you would find that these are people that were probably discredited or not really that deep into this. The second part is I would result in that again, going out and speaking on this thing is not evidence of what they're saying. So if they don't have evidence to back what they're saying, and I'm talking about concrete physical evidence, and then once again, the evidence that they're trying to disprove is also coming from a group of people, something I can't disprove. I'm going to say there's no way for me as a person to be able to believe either side. Right. I heard this argument one time from a buddy of mine, Gabe, right, where he was talking about flat earth theory. Now, I know he doesn't believe in flat earth theory anymore, but the idea was, how can you, meaning me or Aaron, how can we disprove flat earth?
You're right.
How can I? Now, Cody's argument to that was, well, I got up on a plane and I skydived. You can see the curve. You can see it, right? I got to see things from a different perspective, and because I was seeing it from a different perspective, so there's a level of faith that I have in that the Earth is round because it makes sense, and because of what I've learned and what I've seen and what I can represent in the sky. Think that the sun moves and the Earth moves, and how is that being done? It makes sense to me that the Earth is round. But can I prove that the Earth is round? Maybe not. Probably not. So would it matter if I went out and started arguing and chaining myself as a person who, has skydived and telling people, like Cody goes and chains himself to a building and tells everybody that the Earth is actually flat because he skydived from a plane and saw it. The only way that I could truly know that he's right is if I go and do it too. And so when somebody says something like, again, I didn't actually get the message because the video cut off from this guy's arguing, but they're saying, things are getting bad. The ozone layer is breaking apart. The ice cap's warming up. Things are melting. This isn't happening. If we don't make changes, we're all going to die. Or there's going to be food shortages. We're going to have loss of life. Da 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 da. I can do one of two things. I can believe and do what? So either I believe them, but what can I do to make a change in that? Or I don't believe them, and I continue. Actually, maybe it's three-part. I don't believe them, and I continue on doing what I'm doing, and life continues because I don't believe that this is really happening. Or there's the third, and that is that maybe I believe a portion of what they're saying, but rather than spending my time trying to reduce what is already inevitable, that I make the ability for accommodations to be made to make it adaptable, right? I'm going to use probably the wrong terminology or the wrong story to use, but in the sense, I think about like Noah and the flood from the Bible, right? Noah knew the flood was coming. It was inevitable. There was nothing he could do to convince God otherwise to do that.
He just prepared for it.
All he could do was prepare for it. He was supplied the wood. He made the boat. His family helped him. They got the animals came. They got on the boat, and they sat there waiting until the flood came. But they were prepared, and they adapted to the situation. They were called crazy. They were seen as outliers and weirdos. There was all these things happening, but yet in the end, the flood comes. The boat is there. It's prepared, and they adapted to that situation, which allowed them to continue on. And so I come with the pretense of that ideology. I can't disprove that the earth is warming. I can't prove that it's warming, but sitting on my hands and doing nothing doesn't make sense. And so the idea in that is, okay, can I stop driving a gas car? Can I stop doing this? Can we get all these fans? Do this? Is it really going to make a difference? If everyone in the United States stopped and everyone in the UK stopped, it would not slow down the warming of the earth because growing countries aren't going to, because it's the only way they could grow. They need
have the capabilities, right? We would have to. So we the first world countries would have to help them not do it in order for that to happen, and that's just reality.
But they're trying that, right? You've got things like the Davos Convention, right, where they're actually trying to do that, and there's just not enough there to. You're talking about like $1 trillion investment into green energies just from like our perspective. And it's not going to make a difference. Realistically, you would require every human on Earth to not be here for this to actually be successful. Go ahead.
You know who I blame though? If this stuff goes down, you know who I'm going to blame?
Bill Gates
for the ozone. No, I mean aliens maybe. No, seriously.
Oh,
they're trying to shut us down, bro. It's easiest way, right? Kill our atmosphere. No, you know what? My wife, she's all about her hair, always has been, and she told me like in the 90s, she was like a can every other day of that hairnet stuff, right? And so
stop,
bro. She was using some, she was killing the ozone, and I can't imagine how many. You ever seen women's hair in the 80s? It was like just they frizzed that stuff up. So hairnet, I blame hairnet.
Well, I spray some hairspray on mine because this stuff that I use for my hair doesn't hold it right. So I spray a little bit of hairspray on it and I choke half to death on it. So I can only imagine what the earth feels when every other house is doing it.
It's dying, bro.
Even if I stop, nothing changes. And that the survivability of humans should be more important than the earth. Maybe they're tied together, right? But I can't sacrifice all of this stuff only for us to have a deep freeze in 2022 or 2021, where half the state of Texas is without energy because we decided to go on full green energy, and people die because it's cold and freezing and all these things happen. I can't sacrifice that for what's to come that I may never be a part of. It may be hundreds of years before this actually happens. But what I can do is I can focus on things that can help our population, our human society succeed and survive. So things like seawalls, right? If we know that the ocean's level are rising, how many cities and countries are on the coast that are eventually going to get swallowed up by the ocean? Right? And so there are some countries that are putting seawalls in place, making them higher and whatever to sustain the growth or the survivability of those, even if the sea rises. Why aren't we making suggestions for those things? Why are we not structuring more boats or coming up with certain plans for those types of things? Moving people inland, getting them off faults. Maybe it's not possible. Maybe. But I think things like cities and states reinforcing the perimeter of who they are as far as protecting from those inevitable natures of the water rising and the weather. Maybe we got to do something about how hot it gets. Maybe stop people from making air conditioners and running. Like, I'm sorry. We're being told in California we can't run you can only charge your car or run your electricity. You can't do both.
Right.
I'm sorry. Why not build out the infrastructure the way it needs so that it's not going to be? If I can't run my air conditioner now, what's the point of not being able to? What's the point of being able to run it 15 years from now because it's a couple of degrees cooler outside? We're not going to be able to reverse the course action on this if it's true, right? And I'm still on the fence of it all, right? Mainly because it's just something that's not in my eyes and not in my face. I'm not approached with it. I'm sorry, hot weather to me doesn't say that the earth is, falling into this open abyss and one day our ozone's just going to disappear. Maybe it will. Maybe we'll have to live underground, oxygen chambers. I don't know. But the reality is none of that is evidence to me that I need to make a change right now that's going to make an impact. But you always hear the messaging that we have to have a great reset, right? We got to have a great reset. And if we reset, everybody gets back to the same. And then we can all just join in on this, kumbaya, da-da-da-da. And the reality is I don't think that that's ever going to happen. So you've got three factions. You got people that want to make preparations to survive it. You got people that don't believe it and aren't going to do a dang thing. And then you've got the group of people that believe everything has to be blown up. We have to live off the earth in all of our capacity so that this earth can survive. And then you have Elon Musk who wants to go to Mars because he doesn't want to be here anymore. Okay. So I guess my question is how do we go forward? What do we do? How do I know if global warming is really a thing?
Well, I guess we sit back and wait and see what happens.
But maybe we never live it in our time. So then therein lies the problem, right? Now our kids are going to grow and they're going to live past us. They're our legacy. What am I leaving for my kids? Should I fear that the earth is falling apart or should I allow for accommodation? Like, again, I think the position that I take as a skeptic, 100% as a skeptic, is be prepared.
Yeah.
My family likes to go to Disneyland. I, not so much, but my family likes to go to Disneyland. As a person that's never been to Disneyland, Aaron, I can tell you, here's what I would tell you from experience. It's a great place. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to have a lot of fun. Maybe once. Maybe a couple of times.
I'm never going to see it, bro.
Listen, we'll make it happen. But here's the deal. You'll go and you'll experience it. But I promise you, this is what I'm going to promise you right now. Save your money before you go. Be prepared. Yeah. Like have a grip of cash because you got to fly, you got to stay in hotels, you got to rent a car, and then one day at Disneyland's like $2,000. I'm just saying, prepare yourself. And if I don't want to be the guy that goes to Disneyland and didn't save any money, didn't prepare for the trip, and then I'm like, oh crap, this is a $5,000 trip, and I've got $20 in my pocket, right? Yeah. But I also don't want to be the guy that goes, it doesn't cost $5,000. Or sorry, believe that it costs $8,000 to go to Disneyland, and you get there and you realize it's only $3,000, and now you spend $8,000. You have $8,000 that you've spent on things to go to Disneyland, and you don't get your money's worth for it, and now you've wasted all this time and money when really it's not an $8,000 trip; it's really like a $3,000 trip. So, in turn, I think that really comes back to the idea that be prepared for what is to come and the things that you don't know what to expect. So, experienced people such as myself going to Disneyland are telling you, Aaron, it's expensive. You need to save money. Be prepared.
Yeah.
Be prepared. Right?
Absolutely.
There's going to be outliers that go, God, this is going to be the most expensive trip you've ever taken, Aaron. And if you don't save $10,000 for a 2-day trip to Disneyland, you won't survive. So you have to believe whether or not my take on it is true compared to that person's take on it. And as a person that's never really thought about it, probably will go, probably won't go, don't really care, doesn't really matter. I don't really want to spend $5,000, but you have to decide as an individual on that level what to do and what direction to go. And so I tend to lean more towards the side of being prepared for the worst case scenario.
Oh, absolutely.
That was my long way around getting to global warming.
It was. So I wanted to pull up while we're on the phone because we're right outside Dallas, so looking at trends, right? And I pulled up some weather patterns. So 2021 February,
had that 14, 20, low 20s, and I think that's when a lot of the the big snowstorms happened and everything they were talking about, right? 2022 was, I guess, normal, right? 30s, back up and down to 70s, things like that. So I guess what we'll do is, we'll see what happens this February timeframe. And will it be extreme again? Will it be, because I've looked back, they didn't experience this particular drop in weather for at least the last 10 years. So it was the lowest in a decade.
Lowest temperature, but they did have a dip. So I talked to Pastor Josh and I was like, how often does this happen? He said the last time we had snow was 5 to 8 years ago. Right. So he couldn't give me an exact time point, but he said it's in between that 5 to 8 years ago.
They had one day where it was 13 degrees though, looking at it.
At 6. I found it 6 degrees.
I didn't. What day was that? Okay.
I don't know what day it was, but when I was looking at it, it set a record at the first time since 1946. It hit 6 degrees. And I think that was actually Abilene, Texas. So it's a little bit more south, but Texas wide, that was the one that was the record setting temperature. But yeah, when talking to people that are local that have lived here their whole lives, I said, well, how long ago was the last time you had snow? And he goes, well, we had it last year. He goes, but before that, it's probably somewhere between 5, 8 years ago. So that's about what you should expect for it to come back, right? So they have an agreement in how they live here, realizing that every 5, 6, 7 years, they have snow, and they're not surprised by it. I think the people that tend to get surprised by it are younger because they haven't experienced it a lot, or those that have moved from out of state. I work in, again, the IT industry, and of the 6 people that I work with, only one of them is a native Texan, and every one of them was like, oh God, the freeze was the worst thing you've ever seen. And the person that was here was like, yeah, it was pretty bad, but we have cold spells like that, maybe not to that degree, once every 10 years. And so I was like, oh, okay, so, it depends on the perception of the people. We're coming from California. Oh my God, we get Texas froze. Oh, it's always hot and muggy in Texas. And these are people that most of them probably have never even been to Texas.
Straight perception. Yeah, for
sure.
They've
never been to Texas. You know what? I'll be honest with you. Texas is hot and muggy.
I was out here, for our honeymoon and the Christmas day.
Was it like 70s?
It was 80. It was 80 degrees on Christmas Day, high 70s the entire time we were here. So, which is funny because December back in California where we were from, you get to 30, 40s. So it's just different. But I'd be curious to see what happens. I don't know. My gut is with this guy and all his scientists, as we wrap up here, from what I'm seeing, a lot of these activists and what they're saying, if it was just this one kook and 4 of his friends chaining himself to this Chase Manhattan Bank, okay. But it's, and maybe you're right. Maybe it's some protest thing where everybody wants to be a protester. But again, I'm looking at that they've jeopardized heavily their jobs, their careers that they went to school heavily for, the reputation. Because if this guy gets canned from NASA, ain't nobody going to hire him again. What's he going to do? Flip burgers at Burger King, all because he wanted to go out and have some fun and chain himself to a bank? No, I mean, there has to be some validity to what he's saying. That's, again, he's educated enough that he had to have known he was going to jeopardize everything to make this stand. And he must have been passionate enough to make this stand, not just because he wanted to protest. But that's just my point of view, in my opinion. And then all these scientists across the world that are doing the same thing or have done the same thing right around the time he did it. So curious to see what happens.
I am too. And I want to make one last point, kind of going back to your last point of we're talking about the freeze and stuff. We talk about Texas, right? And so we look at Texas as a hot state, and we look at Texas from a very conservative kind of hue, as far as the idea, that we have, and I say Democratic and conservative Republican views, but Texas is one of the leading states with regards to green energy. Did you know that?
No, it's good to know.
Yes, 1999, George W. Bush signed into law a deregulation of the state's power market, meaning that we didn't have something like a big PG&E that owned 90% like you did in California, right? So you had a deregulation, and then on top of that, as part of that same law, he provisioned what he called renewable energy, right? He wanted a capacity. So by the year 2009, he wanted the capacity of the renewable energy market to be around 2,000 watts. and it ended up coming actually 4 years before that in 2005, right? After Bush left, the successor here, this is back when I think he was governor, right? He was the governor of Texas, George W. Bush. It was followed up by Governor Rick Perry, where he raised that bar. He wanted by 2025 to have 10,000 megawatts of electricity be generated by green energy. Well, in 2016, they hit 19,000, right? So you have one of the largest markets for green energy in the state of Texas. Here's what's different. The last time we had a big freeze like this, we were not running on renewable energy. We were running on carbon fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And so a big proponent, and I think a reason for why it was so drastic, was not the weather itself, but was the result of what the weather caused to this renewable energy. And so that's where I get stuck in. I like the idea of green energy. I think it's fantastic. I think it's fantastic as a supplement. I don't believe that we should be going away from nuclear power plants and fossil fuels and fracking, which is fracking brings fossil fuel emissions way down, by the way. If you've never really looked into fracking, it actually reduces the emissions that are generated during the process of generating fossil fuels. But anyways, I don't think we should be going away from those things, but I think that electric cars and hydro pumps coming from dams and lakes, and those what do they call those big fans that they use for the windmills to generate wind and solar. I don't think any of those things should be negated. I'm not a disbeliever in the idea that we shouldn't invest into these things, but we should not invest into these things with the idea that we need to go away from fossil fuels. Another statistic that I throw out there is that the United States is actually, if I was reading, we have the most fossil fuel in the world. I always thought it was like the desert, right? Sudan or whatever it was. I can't remember the country we all buy oil from. Over there, it's not Pakistan, but it's in Egypt, near Egypt somewhere. But we buy. My brain is all over the place. But anyways, we buy oil from them, and I always thought that we generate the most oil in the world.
Right. No, I know.
But we don't do anything with it.
That's a whole other argument for another day, because at the end of the day, it's crazy how much money we spend buying oil from other countries.
And I agree, that's a whole nother topic. But the point I'm trying to make on it is a lot of these things feel politically driven with regards to, oh God, it's so hot outside. Well, if we all went green energy, this wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And the reality is I don't believe it to be true.
And I agree with you on that aspect. But these, again, I'm looking at the worldwide, these scientists across the world that have stepped out and done this in a multitude of different countries. And I don't know. I just have to feel like there's definitely some validity there. There has to be something that they've seen and studied, again, in all their time doing this. And I mean, this guy's, I guess, moderately young. I think he's in his 30s, but there's a handful of others that are all PhD, been doing this a long time in their 40s and 50s that stepped out and did it too. So we're not just talking about like, this is like some guy that's only been doing this for 10, 15 years. No, we're talking about people that have been doing it for 20 and 30 and they're taking this aggressive stance in the belief that they're tired of being quieted. They're tired of being pushed out and saying, being told, hey, keep this under wraps type thing. And so they did this protest. And is there a portion of it that it could be a show? Yes. But part of me has to believe that it is stinted from something that they truly, truly believe in. And again, it'll be quite wild to see what transpires. Right.
We'll see.
Hopefully we get snow for Christmas. That'd be great.
Dude, that would be great. I'd be down for some snow. I'd also be down for some rain.
That'd be cool too.
Not
110 degrees. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so. Just some rain.
Anyways, we great episode. We miss Cody. He'll be back. Hopefully, when does he come back?
Cody wasn't here. Cody, you there?
Check.
Oh no, he doesn't really talk a lot on episodes anyway. So he's still taking his turn on Magic. Yeah, that's we've been waiting this whole time. We actually decided to record this while playing a game with him.
Yeah,
so
our episode.
We better get back to the game.
That's right. Anyways, hey, Twister World fam, as always, we love you. We'll catch you next time. We're out.
Peace out.